I inherited an old, crumbling garage from my grandfather, while my sister got a 2-bedroom apartment in New York City. When my husband found out, he called me a useless fool and kicked me out of the house. So I decided to spend the night in the garage. But when I opened it, I froze on the spot at what I saw. At that moment, I couldn't believe my ears. Richard's words pierced my mind like burning needles. 15 years of marriage, and only now did I see who he really was. A useless fool. That's what he called me when I told him about my grandfather's inheritance. His pupils widened like a predator spotting its prey, then narrowed in disappointment and rage when he realized all I got was an old garage on the outskirts of town. Your sister got an apartment in New York, and what did you get? A dump? I always knew you were a loser, Victoria. But this is pathetic. He looked me up and down with disgust, as if I were some kind of insect. I stood in the middle of our kitchen, clutching the ownership certificate in my hands. The document that had seemed so valuable just that morning now felt like a worthless scrap of paper. Richard, Grandpa didn't even have to leave us anything at all. I tried to object, but my voice trembled with betrayal. Shut up. I've put up with you for 15 years. 15 years waiting for you to bring anything to this family. And what do you bring? A garage? That's it. I've had enough. Get out of my house. Your house. We bought it together. We paid the mortgage together. He laughed in my face. It was a cold, awful laugh, like metal scraping against glass. Are you serious? Your little librarian salary? Those pathetic pennies? That barely covered the utilities. I paid for this house. It's mine. Now pack your things and get out. I felt like I was dreaming. Like this was some terrible nightmare I would wake up from any second. But when he slammed his fist on the table, the sound snapped me back to reality. The glasses jumped, one fell and shattered. A shard scratched my ankle, but I barely felt it. Something inside me died and turned to ice. You have 30 minutes. After that, I'm throwing your stuff out on the street. He turned and stormed out of the kitchen, slamming the door so hard that a picture fell off the wall. Our wedding photo, where we were smiling so happily. The glass cracked right across Richard's smile. How fitting. I packed my things mechanically, folding them into an old suitcase. My hands moved on their own while my mind refused to process what was happening. 15 years. 15 years of my life given to this man. This man who now stood in the bedroom doorway, watching me with contempt, counting down the minutes. Where are you going to go? He asked suddenly, not out of concern, but with a kind of sadistic curiosity. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, but because I genuinely didn't know. To your parents? They died 5 years ago. To your sister? Julia never really liked me, and after the way the inheritance was split, she definitely wouldn't want to see me now. Friends? Over the years with Richard, I had lost them all. He'd made sure of that, cutting me off from everyone. For once in your life, could you make the right decision? He continued, seeing my silence. Call your sister. Ask her to let you stay in her fancy new New York apartment. Actually, forget it. She's smart, unlike you. She won't even let you in the door. His words were like salt in an open wound. But I had no energy left to respond. I closed my suitcase and glanced at the clock. 20 minutes had passed. I'm leaving, I said quietly. Finally. Richard crossed his arms, blocking the bedroom door. Leave the keys on the table. I pulled the keyring from my pocket and unhooked the house key. The house where I'd lived for 10 years. The house I had filled with warmth, where I grew flowers, cooked meals, cleaned, did laundry, built a home. A house that, as it turned out, was never really mine. I placed the key on the coffee table and looked up at Richard. I wanted to memorize his face, to understand how the man I shared my bed with, prayed for when he was sick, trusted for all these years, could just erase 15 years of our life together. But all I saw was a cold emptiness. He looked right through me, as if I didn't exist. I walked outside. It was late October, and a light drizzle was falling. I buttoned my coat, but it did nothing against the biting cold. Or maybe the cold wasn't coming from outside at all, but from somewhere deep within me. The suitcase felt unbearably heavy, even though I had only packed the essentials. I had no idea where to go. My bank card was in my pocket, but it only had a few $100s left. My last librarian paycheck, pathetic pennies, as Richard called them. A hotel? That would cover 1 or 2 nights at most. Then what? I sat on a park bench not far from the house, mechanically going through my options. The rain was getting heavier, but I barely noticed. Inside me was an emptiness slowly filling with the realization of what had just happened. And suddenly, it hit me. The garage. That old, crumbling garage Grandpa left me. The place that destroyed my family life. Maybe I could at least spend the night there until I figured out what to do next. I took out my phone, opened the map, and set the route. The garage was in an industrial zone on the edge of town, with 2 bus transfers needed to get there. I had no other choice. The trip took almost 2 hours. The buses ran infrequently, and I waited at stops in the rain for ages. By the time I finally arrived, it was dark. The industrial area looked abandoned and eerie. Dim streetlights barely lit the cracked road lined with rows of old garages. I checked the documents again. Garage number 123. I walked down the row, squinting at the faded numbers on the rusty doors. Some garages looked well kept, with new locks and fresh paint. Others seemed abandoned for decades. Finally, I found the right number. The garage looked like it hadn't been opened in years. The door was thick with rust, the lock so corroded it seemed welded to the latch. I pulled out the key the notary had given me. It was old and heavy, with strange carvings, nothing like modern keys. I struggled to fit it into the keyhole and tried to turn it. Nothing. It wouldn't budge. I tried again, using more force. The mechanism inside groaned but didn't move. Despair crashed over me again. Was I really going to end up on the street? In an industrial zone, in the rain, with a suitcase full of clothes and no roof over my head? What did I do to deserve this? I whispered, pressing my forehead against the cold metal. Why is this happening to me? As if in response to my question, the lock suddenly clicked and turned. The key moved without me even applying force. I stepped back, unable to believe my eyes, then carefully pulled on the garage handle. The doors creaked open, the sound echoing through the empty industrial zone. And that's when I saw it. The thing that made me freeze in place, forgetting about the cold, the rain, my husband's betrayal, forgetting about everything. Inside the garage, lit by my phone's flashlight, something metallic gleamed. It was big, covered with an old tarp. I stepped closer, still not understanding what I was looking at. My hand reached for the tarp. The fabric was damp, heavy, layered with dust. I tugged at the edge, and the tarp slowly slid off, revealing what lay hidden underneath. But more on that later. First, I need to tell you about my grandfather. The man who, without even knowing it, changed my life forever. Peter Michael Thompson wasn't just my grandfather. In our family, he was a legend. Tall and fit even at 85, with thick white hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see right through you. He rarely smiled and almost never raised his voice, but when he spoke, everyone listened. Grandpa worked as an engineer at a large factory and later taught at a technical college. People respected him, they valued his opinion. I always felt a strange mix of love, awe, and fear toward him. Love because he was the only one who saw more in me than just a quiet, unremarkable girl. Awe because to me, he seemed like a man from another era, strong, principled, unbreakable. And fear because his approval meant too much to me, and disappointing him was the scariest thing in the world. My sister Julia was different with him. She wasn't afraid of him, she argued with him, even talked back. And strangely, he liked that about her. She has character, he would say approvingly when Julia stood her ground against any authority. We were so different, Julia and I. She was bright, energetic, ambitious. She studied at a prestigious school, then an even more prestigious university. She always knew what she wanted and how to get it. I, on the other hand, was quiet. I loved books more than people. I dreamed instead of acted. "Victoria, you need a bit of Julia's character," Mom would say whenever I gave my sister a toy, the window seat in the car, or the last candy in the box. But I never saw a problem with that. I didn't want to fight or argue or prove anything. I just wanted everyone to be happy. And if that meant giving up a little, what was the big deal? That trait defined my entire life. I became a librarian not because I dreamed of it since childhood, but because I didn't get accepted where I really wanted to go, and the library science department gladly took me in. I married Richard not because I was madly in love with him, but because he pursued me so persistently, and I felt too awkward to say no. "You always take the path of least resistance," Julia once told me when I complained that Richard wouldn't let me go on a weekend trip with my friends. "That's why you live the way you do." I was hurt at the time, but deep down I knew she was right. The path of least resistance. That's what led me to a life that brought no joy but demanded no fight. Grandpa seemed to understand that better than anyone. He never openly criticized me like Julia or Mom. But sometimes, when I caught him watching me closely, I felt like he saw something in me that I didn't see myself. "You have a strong character, Victoria," he told me once when we were alone at his summer house. I was helping him in the garden while everyone else went swimming at the lake. "You just don't know it yet." I blushed and tried to change the subject, but his words stayed with me. A strong character. Me, the person who drifted through life. "Strength isn't always about loud words or bold actions," he continued, as if reading my thoughts. "Sometimes it's patience, the ability to wait, the ability to see good even in the hardest situations." Back then, I thought he was just trying to comfort me, to find something good in my weakness. But now, standing in the rain by the old garage, I wondered if his words had a deeper meaning. Grandpa died quietly in his sleep 3 months ago. Julia and I both flew in for the funeral, dressed in black, our eyes red from crying. For the first time in years, we felt truly close, united by grief. But that closeness didn't last. After the funeral came the thing that divides even the closest families, the inheritance. Grandpa didn't have a lot of valuable things. An apartment in New York City that he'd received years ago as a work merit reward. A country house in the state, old but solid, with half an acre of land. And the garage, the very one I was standing in now. Julia immediately claimed the apartment. "I need a place in New York. I work there, I have opportunities there. You and Richard are settled in your city." If Mom had still been alive, maybe she would have insisted on a fairer split. But she was gone, and me, true to my habit of avoiding conflict, I agreed. After all, I didn't need an apartment in New York. Richard and I had our own home. Or so I thought. We decided to sell the country house and split the money. And the garage somehow went unclaimed. Julia waved it off dismissively when the notary mentioned it. "That old shack? Who needs it?" And once again, I stayed silent. If Julia doesn't want the garage, I'll take it. I didn't think about its value or uselessness. It was just another part of Grandpa's legacy that came to me. The notary filed the paperwork. The apartment went to Julia, the country house was listed for sale, and the garage became mine. I didn't even ask where it was or what was inside. I took the papers and the key, put them in my bag, and forgot about them for weeks. I only remembered yesterday, while sorting through old documents. I found the ownership certificate, turned the heavy, intricately carved key over in my hands. And I decided to tell Richard. After all, it was an inheritance, even if it wasn't as valuable as Julia's New York apartment. His reaction shocked me. The sudden rage, the disgust, the hateful words. It all poured out in an instant, like a dam breaking. And suddenly, I realized that all 15 years of our marriage, Richard had been wearing a mask. The mask of a caring husband, hiding his true face. Cold, calculating, cruel. Or maybe the mask had slowly become his face. Maybe in the beginning he really did love me. Even just a little. Or was it always about calculation? After all, even how we met wasn't random. We met at the library where I worked. Richard came looking for some rare economics book. He was 10 years older than me, successful, confident. Men like him never noticed me. But he did. He asked my name, invited me out after work. I refused. Not because I didn't like him, but because I didn't believe his interest was real. Why would a man like that want a quiet librarian? But he came back the next day. And the next. And the next week. He brought flowers, chocolates, compliments. I knew the moment I saw you that you were special, he said on our first date. There's something real about you that other women don't have. I believed him. Of course I did. I wanted so badly to be special, real, different. I wanted someone to see me, appreciate me, love me. Our relationship moved fast. 6 months later, he proposed. 3 months after that, we were married. Grandpa was the only one who didn't look completely happy at our wedding. Are you sure, Victoria? He asked when we were alone. Is this man really the one you need? I love him, Grandpa, I replied. And it was true. I loved Richard. I loved his confidence, his ambition, his ability to achieve whatever he wanted. All the things I lacked. Love is important, Grandpa said thoughtfully. But it's not everything. Respect, trust, shared values. Without those, love burns out quickly. I didn't think much of his words. I believed that what Richard and I had was special, that it could survive anything. How wrong I was. The first years of our marriage were relatively happy. Richard worked a lot, building his career in banking. I kept my job at the library, even though the salary, as he put it, was laughable. But I loved it. I loved being among books, helping people find what they needed. We rented an apartment, saving up for a home of our own. Eventually, we saved enough for a down payment on a small house in the suburbs. It wasn't big, but it was cozy, with a little garden where I could grow flowers. Now we have a real home, Richard said as we stepped over the threshold. A home we built together. I was happy. Truly happy. I thought everything was falling into place just as it was supposed to. A job I loved, a husband who cared for me, and a home of our own. But gradually, something began to change. Richard started staying late at work more often, and he barely cared about what was going on in my life. Whenever I brought up the idea of having kids, he always had 1,000 reasons why it wasn't the right time. The mortgage, instability at work, the need to renovate the house. Then the criticism started. At first, it was small, almost unnoticeable. You bought the wrong kind of coffee again? Why can't you iron a shirt properly? Don't you think you've put on some weight? But soon, the criticism became harsher. Why are you still working at that library? A normal wife would have found a better paying job by now. Do you even realize how hard I work to support both of us? Maybe it's time you thought about your worth in this marriage. I kept apologizing, trying to do better. But no matter what I did, it was never good enough for Richard. My relationship with Julia also became more strained. She built an impressive career in an international company, traveled the world, and lived a bright, busy life. Every conversation turned into her monologue about her achievements and my missed opportunities. Victoria, you've buried yourself alive in that small town, she'd say whenever she visited every couple of years. Working at a library, with that boring husband, no prospects. That's not a life, that's just existing. I defended myself as best I could. I like my life, Julia. Not everyone needs a career and travel. Some people are happy with simple things. But deep down, I knew she was right. My life really had turned into mere existence. Work, home, rare meetings with the few friends I had left, friends Richard considered too unintelligent to spend time with. And the constant feeling of guilt and inadequacy that he nurtured in me so skillfully. When Grandpa died, something inside me broke completely. He was the last person who believed in me, who saw me as more than just a failure. With his death, my last pillar of strength was gone. Then everything happened at once. The inheritance, Richard's reaction, getting kicked out. And now here I was, standing in this old garage, soaked to the bone, with a suitcase of clothes and no idea what to do next. But enough of the sad part. Let's go back to the moment I pulled off the tarp and saw something that made me forget about everything else. Underneath the tarp was a car. But not just any car. It was a black 1950s Ford Thunderbird with chrome details, perfectly preserved as if it had just rolled off the assembly line. I didn't know much about vintage cars, but even I understood that this was a true classic. A car worth a fortune. This can't be real, I whispered, walking around it in awe. My flashlight shone over flawless paint, gleaming wheels, leather seats without a single crack. I gently ran my hand over the hood. The metal was cold but somehow radiated warmth, like the car was alive, just waiting to be awakened from its long sleep. When I was a kid, Grandpa used to tell me about his first car. A black Ford Thunderbird he bought with his first big bonus. He said how much he loved it, how he took care of every detail. But then, according to him, he sold it when my dad was born to buy a more practical, modern car. Sometimes I miss it, he once told me. I miss that feeling of freedom it gave me. Like the whole world was open to me, as long as I turned the key. And now here it was. The exact same model. Coincidence? No way. This had to be Grandpa's Thunderbird. But how did it end up here, in this garage? And why did he never tell us he kept it? But that wasn't the only surprise waiting for me in the garage. I shined my flashlight behind the car and saw an old wooden table. On it was a box. Small, wooden, carved with the same intricate patterns as my garage key. I stepped closer and placed my hand on the lid. Something told me that inside this box was something important. Something meant just for me. The lid creaked open softly. Inside was an envelope, yellowed with age but still sealed. On it was written, Victoria. Open when the time comes. Grandpa's handwriting. Firm, angular, unmistakable. I picked up the envelope with shaking hands and held it under my flashlight. The paper felt so fragile it seemed like it might crumble from a careless touch. When the time comes. But how could Grandpa have known I'd end up here? That Richard would kick me out? That I'd have nowhere else to go but this old garage? Or did he know something else? Something he never told us? I carefully opened the envelope, trying not to damage the paper. Inside was a letter, several pages covered in his firm handwriting. And something else. A piece of metallic cloth. I unfolded it and found a key. Not like the garage key, but small, delicate, with an ornate crown-shaped head. A key for the car? Or for something else? My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. I held the letter up to the light and started reading. My dear Victoria, Grandpa wrote, if you're reading this, it means I'm already gone, and you've found your way to my old garage. You've probably already seen my Thunderbird. The car I never actually sold, despite what I told everyone, including you. I took a deep breath. So I was right. This really was his car, the one he told me about. You're probably surprised and confused. Why didn't I tell you the truth while I was alive? Why did I keep it a secret? I'll try to explain. Let me start from the beginning. This Thunderbird really was my first car, bought with my bonus in '54. But it was more than just a car. It's a witness to history. My history, our family's history, and in a way, our country's history too. I turned the page, feeling like his words were pulling me into a deep river, carrying me far away from reality, from the cold garage, the rainy night, my husband's betrayal. I never told you the whole truth about myself, Victoria. About who I was and what I did. Partly out of fear, partly to protect you and the family. But now, since I'm gone, I want you to know. I wasn't just an engineer at a factory. That was my cover. In reality, I worked in special services. A secret department few people knew about. We did what would now be called industrial espionage. We obtained technologies, blueprints, prototypes from abroad. I could barely breathe. Grandpa a spy? The man I knew all my life, who read me bedtime stories, taught me to ride a bike, comforted me when I got bad grades. This man had been a secret agent? Don't think badly of me, Victoria. I always acted in the interest of my country and my people. I never crossed certain lines. I never hurt innocent people, never betrayed those who trusted me. This Thunderbird wasn't just my transport. It was part of my work. It has hidden compartments. Places where I carried documents, samples, sometimes even people who needed to be evaluated. I tore my eyes from the letter and looked at the car again with a new perspective. Hidden compartments? In this perfectly preserved Thunderbird? But where? How? You're probably wondering why I'm telling you all this now. Why I left you the garage and the car. Why I chose you and not Julia or anyone else in the family. The answer is simple, though it might be hard to believe. Because you're like me, Victoria. Not in how you look, but in who you are inside. You have that same core I had, even if you've never noticed it yourself. I couldn't help but smile, remembering our talk at his summer house. You have a strong character, Victoria. You just don't know it yet. I watched you all your life. I saw you grow, saw your personality take shape. I saw your kindness, your patience, your ability to see the good in people. But I also saw how you let others decide for you, how you always chose the path of least resistance. I don't blame you for that, Victoria. We all walk our own paths. But I knew that someday the moment would come when you'd have to make a choice. When you'd stand at a crossroads. And you'd need help. My help. If you're reading this letter, that moment has come. You're facing a choice that will determine the rest of your life. And I want to help you make the right one. I wiped the tears that had started falling down my cheeks without me even noticing. How did Grandpa know? How could he have seen this coming? The car I'm leaving you isn't just a valuable classic, though it is that too. It's the key to a new life. A life where you finally become who you were always meant to be. Strong, independent, free from other people's expectations and manipulations. The car has a hidden compartment. Use the key I included with this letter to find it. Inside, you'll find something that will help you start over. But remember, Victoria, this isn't just a gift. It's a responsibility. What you find will change not only your life but the lives of many others. Use it wisely. And one more thing. Never fully trust anyone, especially those who seem closest. Sometimes betrayal comes from where you least expect it. I clutched the letter in my hands, trying to process everything I had just read. A hidden compartment in the car. A key to a new life. Betrayal from those closest to me. It sounded like the plot of a spy novel, not real life. Not my life. But betrayal had already happened. The husband I trusted for 15 years kicked me out and called me a useless fool. And now Grandpa, as if he knew this would happen, had left me a secret gift from the past. I looked at the key I was still holding in my hand. Small, delicate, with a little crown at the top. The key to the hidden compartment in the Thunderbird. The compartment that, according to Grandpa, held something that could change my life. Should I really be looking for it right now? Maybe I needed to think things through first, get some sleep, recover from everything that had happened today. But curiosity won over caution. I walked around the car, trying to figure out where the secret compartment could be. Under the seats? In the trunk? Under the hood? I opened the driver's door. The interior was as flawless as the exterior. Leather seats, a steering wheel with chrome trim. Everything looked like it had just come off the assembly line yesterday, not 70 years ago. I sat behind the wheel, running my hands over the leather, and then I noticed something odd. A small bulge on the side of the seat, almost invisible unless you knew what to look for. I brought the key closer and saw a tiny hole, perfectly shaped for it. My heart started racing as I slid the key in and turned it. There was a soft click, and part of the seat shifted aside, revealing a hidden compartment. I shone my flashlight inside and saw a box. Small, metallic, with intricate designs on the lid. I carefully pulled it out and opened it. Inside were documents. A passport with the name Victoria Patricia Williams, the birth date matching mine. My photo, but a different last name. A driver's license with the same name. A bank card, a sealed envelope labeled Code I, and a keychain with the letter D. There was also a thick stack of cash. Euros and dollars. I didn't bother counting, but it looked like tens of thousands of dollars. More money than I'd ever dreamed of having. And there was a note. Short, in Grandpa's firm handwriting. Apartment at Park Avenue 42, apartment 17. Car is in the underground parking, spot 42. Safety deposit box at Chase Bank on Madison Avenue, number 237. All documents are in order. Live freely, Victoria. You deserve this. PM. I leaned back against the seat, trying to process what I had just found. Grandpa hadn't just left me a car and a garage. He had left me a whole new identity. Money. An apartment in the city center. Another car. And a safety deposit box with God knows what inside. It was so unreal that it felt like a dream. But the box in my hands was real enough. So was the passport with my photo, the money, the keys to an apartment on Park Avenue. But why? Why would Grandpa create a backup identity for me? Why all this money, this apartment, this car? What did he want me to do with it all? I read his letter again, searching for answers. The key to a new life. A life where you finally become who you were always meant to be. Strong, independent, free from others' expectations and manipulations. Did Grandpa somehow know I'd end up like this? That my marriage would fall apart, that I'd have nowhere to go? Or did he know something about Richard that I didn't? Never fully trust anyone, especially those who seemed the closest. Those words now felt like a direct warning about Richard. But how could Grandpa have known? I remembered how strangely reserved he had always been around my husband. Never openly unfriendly, but never warm either. They rarely talked, and when they did, it was about neutral things. Weather, politics, sports. Could Grandpa, with his years of experience in the special services, have seen something in Richard that I couldn't? Signs of lies, manipulation, hidden motives? And what was I supposed to do now? Use this new identity, this money, this apartment? Start a new life as Victoria Williams? Or go back to my old life, try to reconcile with Richard, pretend I hadn't found any of this? I knew the answer before I even asked myself the question. There was no going back. Richard had shown me his true face, and I couldn't pretend I hadn't seen it. I couldn't go back to a life where I was just a shadow of myself, where my worth was measured only by how useful I was to my husband. Grandpa had given me a choice, and I had made it. I would use what he left me. I would start a new life. Become the person I was always meant to be. Strong, independent, free. But first, I had to solve one more mystery. What was in the safety deposit box Grandpa mentioned? What documents were so important that he couldn't leave them in the car's hidden compartment? And the biggest question of all, who was my grandfather, really? What did he do in his secret life as an agent? And what did all of this have to do with me? All I knew was that the road that led me to this old garage was only the beginning. The beginning of a journey that would change not just my life, but the lives of many others. Just like Grandpa had warned. I closed the box, put everything back, and locked the compartment. Then I got out of the car and covered it again with the tarp. I needed time to think, to plan my next steps. But first, I needed sleep to recover from the chaos of this day. I looked around for a place to spend the night. The garage was surprisingly clean, no cobwebs or dust, as if someone had been taking care of it regularly. In the corner, I noticed an old couch covered with a checkered blanket. Next to it was a small table, and on it a thermos. I walked closer, not believing my eyes. The thermos was new, modern, definitely not from the 50s. And next to it was a note. Mint and lemon balm tea. Always helps to calm down. Rest, Victoria. Tomorrow is a new day. PM. Grandpa's handwriting. The same strong, confident lines. But that was impossible. Grandpa had died 3 months ago. How could he have left a thermos with hot tea here? I touched the thermos carefully. It was warm. Not hot, but definitely not cold. As if the tea had been poured just a few hours ago. It made no sense. Was it some kind of miracle? Or was there someone else who had access to this garage? Someone who knew I would come today. I opened the thermos and immediately smelled the familiar scent. Mint and lemon balm tea, just like Grandpa always brewed. It calms your nerves and clears your mind, he would say, handing me a cup. I poured some tea into the thermos lid and took a sip. It was the perfect temperature. Warm, but not burning. And the taste. Exactly as I remembered from childhood. Grandpa's tea. Tears streamed down my face, but this time they weren't tears of despair or fear. They were tears of gratitude. Gratitude to Grandpa, who somehow was still taking care of me, even after his death. I wrapped myself in the blanket, which also smelled like him. Of tobacco, forest, and something deeply familiar and safe. And for the first time that crazy day, I felt peace. As if strong, loving arms were wrapping around me, protecting me from the world. Thank you, Grandpa, I whispered as I drifted off to sleep. For everything. I dreamt a strange dream. I was driving in the black Thunderbird down an unfamiliar road. Grandpa was behind the wheel, young, with black hair instead of white, but with the same piercing blue eyes. Where are we going, Grandpa? I asked. To a place where you can be yourself, Victoria, he answered without taking his eyes off the road. A place with no other people's expectations, no rules forced upon you, no judgments. Does such a place exist? He turned to me and smiled. Not his usual restrained smile, but wide, open, youthful. It exists everywhere, Victoria. You just need to find the courage to see it. The road stretched ahead, winding between hills, and it seemed endless. The sky above was clear, blue, without a single cloud. Fields of golden wheat spread out on both sides. The wind blew through my hair, the sun warmed my face. I felt a strange lightness, as if a heavy burden had been lifted off my shoulders. The burden of other people's expectations, disappointments, and judgments. I'm proud of you, Victoria, Grandpa said, his eyes still on the road. I've always been proud. Even when you made mistakes. Even when you let others decide for you. Especially then. He smiled again. Because I knew. One day, you would find your own way. And today is that day. The car stopped at the top of a hill. Before us lay a small town nestled in green. White houses with red roofs, narrow streets, a church with a tall steeple. Everything bathed in the golden light of the setting sun. This is your home, Victoria, Grandpa said. Not the place where you live with someone who doesn't value you. Not where you hide your true self. This is where you can be who you are. Free. Real. I don't know how to be myself, Grandpa, I admitted. I've been what others wanted me to be for so long, I've forgotten who I really am. You'll remember, he said, placing his hand over mine. Just listen to your heart. It never lies. I woke up with the first rays of sunlight streaming through the small garage window. The dream had felt so real that I lay there for a few minutes, soaking in its peace. The sense of freedom, the warmth of Grandpa's smile, the certainty that everything would be okay. But reality soon reminded me it was waiting. I was in that old garage, with no home, no husband, and no idea what to do next. And yet, I had a new name, money, keys to an apartment in New York. And a car. A real treasure, probably worth a fortune. I stood up, folded the blanket, and straightened the couch. I walked over to the Thunderbird, running my hand along the tarp. What was I supposed to do with this car? Leave it here? Sell it? Use it? I didn't know how to drive. I'd never even gotten a license, though in the box Grandpa left, there was a driver's license in the name of Victoria Williams. I decided to leave the car in the garage for now. It had been sitting here for years, it could sit a little longer. First, I had bigger problems to solve. Where I was going to live, how I would earn a living, what to do with this new identity Grandpa had given me. I gathered my things, making sure everything in the garage was as it had been. The tarp covered the car securely, the secret compartment was locked, and the box with the documents and money was safely in my bag. Before I left, I took one last look around. What a strange place. An old garage holding a classic car and my grandfather's secrets. A garage that had changed my life in a single night. "Thank you, Grandpa," I whispered. "For everything." I locked the garage, checking twice to make sure the lock clicked shut. I put the key in my pocket, along with the other keys. The ones to the Park Avenue apartment, the underground parking spot, the safety deposit box. And then I headed to the bus stop. I was on my way to New York. On my way to the new life Grandpa had left for me. The bus to the train station was nearly empty. I sat by the window, watching the city roll by. The city where I had lived most of my life. Where I went to school, then college. Where I met Richard, married him, spent 15 years in a marriage that, as it turned out, was built on lies. I thought about how easily we accept the reality given to us. How rarely we question what seems obvious. Richard loves me. I'm happy in my marriage. My home is wherever my husband is. But what if none of that was true? What if Richard never really loved me? What if I wasn't happy, just used to my cage? What if my real home was somewhere else entirely? Grandpa seemed to know the answers to those questions. He knew, and he tried to prepare me for the moment I would realize them myself. At the train station, I bought a ticket for the next train to New York. I had about an hour before departure, so I decided to freshen up. In the restroom, I washed my face, brushed my hair, changed into clean clothes from my suitcase. Looking in the mirror, I tried to see the Victoria Grandpa had spoken of. Strong, independent, free. But all I saw was a tired, middle-aged woman with red, tear-stained eyes and a bitter line around her mouth. Time, I told my reflection. I just need time. The train ride to New York took 4 hours. I sat by the window, watching the fields, forests, and small stations rush by. The carriage was quiet. Most passengers were dozing or staring at their phones and tablets. I pulled out the passport Grandpa had left me. Victoria Patricia Williams. My photo, my age, but a different last name. The document looked real, with security features, holograms, and watermarks. How did Grandpa get it? Did he still have connections in the intelligence world? Or did he use other, less legal channels? And why? Why create a backup identity for me? To protect me from someone? From Richard? But why? What did Grandpa know about my husband that I didn't? The questions kept piling up, but I had no answers. I hoped I'd find some in the safety deposit box Grandpa had mentioned. Maybe there were documents, letters, something that would shed light on this entire mystery. I arrived in New York in the afternoon. The city greeted me with cold rain and crowds rushing in every direction. I stepped out of the station and hailed a cab. Park Avenue, 42, I told the driver, feeling strange saying those words. I was heading to an apartment that, on paper, belonged to me, but I'd only found out about it yesterday. The building on Park Avenue was an elegant pre-war construction, the kind built in the early 20th century for wealthy New Yorkers. High ceilings, refined architecture, wide windows. These buildings were always considered elite housing in the heart of Manhattan. I found the entrance and opened the door with one of the keys Grandpa had left me. Inside, it was clean and bright, smelling of fresh flowers and expensive perfume. Behind the concierge desk sat an older man with a neatly trimmed gray beard. "Good afternoon," I greeted him, feeling unsure. What if he knew all the residents by face? What if he started asking questions? But the concierge just nodded with a polite smile. "Good afternoon, Victoria. Nice to see you again." I froze. He knew me? Or rather, he knew Victoria Williams. But how was that possible? Can I take your bag? The concierge offered, seeing my confusion. No, thank you, I've got it, I tried to smile naturally. It's been a while since I was here, I'm a bit out of practice. Yes, we haven't seen you in almost a year, the concierge nodded. Peter said you were away on a long assignment. Grandpa. It was Grandpa again. He hadn't just left me an apartment, he had created an entire backstory for me. An assignment. A year away. A concierge who knew me as Victoria Williams. Yes, work, I nodded vaguely. You don't always get to choose. Of course, he said sympathetically. Your apartment is ready for you. Peter arranged for cleaning once a month. They were here last week. Thank you, I said, heading to the elevator, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. Grandpa had thought of everything. Even having the apartment cleaned so it wouldn't sit dusty and abandoned. Apartment 17 was on the 4th floor. I opened the door, stepped inside, and stood there in shock. It wasn't just an apartment. It was a palace. A spacious entryway with an antique console table and a huge mirror in a gilded frame. A living room with tall windows overlooking a quiet New York courtyard. A kitchen fitted with the latest appliances. A bedroom with a massive canopy bed. And everywhere, books. Old and new, leather-bound and paperback, in English and other languages. Floor-to-ceiling shelves in the living room, stacks of books on the bedside tables, even a small shelf with reading material in the bathroom. Grandpa knew my love for books. He had created a space where I could feel at home. Surrounded by stories, knowledge, and worlds waiting to be opened with a turn of the page. I walked through the apartment in disbelief. Every detail was thought out with extraordinary care. Antique furniture mixed with modern tech. The paintings on the walls were probably originals, not reproductions. In a cabinet stood a set of china I recognized. Family heirloom china Grandpa had inherited from his mother. In the bedroom, I found a wardrobe full of clothes. Women's clothes in my size, my style, but far more expensive and elegant than anything I had ever owned. Dresses by famous designers, wool suits, silk blouses, cashmere sweaters. In the bathroom were luxury brand cosmetics. In the cabinet, I even found the medications I used to take for rare migraines and seasonal allergies. It was unbelievable. Grandpa hadn't just left me an apartment. He had created an entire life for me. A life I could step into just by crossing the threshold. A life where everything was ready and waiting. I returned to the living room and noticed a photo in a silver frame on the table. It showed Grandpa and me, laughing, standing in front of the Statue of Liberty. But I had never been to the Statue of Liberty. And I had never taken that photo with Grandpa. It was an expertly crafted fake, probably made with modern technology. Next to the photo was an envelope. I opened it and found a note inside. Welcome home, Victoria. I hope you'll like it here. There's food in the fridge and a bottle of good wine in the cupboard. Rest, gather your strength. Then decide what to do next. But remember you're no longer alone. PM. I sank into a chair, feeling tears welling up in my throat. Grandpa, what have you done? Why did you create this parallel life for me? Who were you trying to protect me from? And how? How did you know I would end up like this? I walked to the window, looking out at the New York courtyard below. Children were playing, an elderly couple was walking a small dog, a young mother pushed a stroller. Ordinary life, moving along, unaware of the upheaval in my small world. I could stay here. Become Victoria Williams. Live in this beautiful apartment, use the money Grandpa left me. Start a new life, one without Richard, without his contempt, his manipulations. But there was another side to it. I didn't know where this money came from, or this apartment. I didn't know what Grandpa really did in his secret life. I didn't know if accepting this inheritance would come with obligations I couldn't even imagine. And there was one more thing. If I became Victoria Williams, what would happen to Victoria Thompson? The woman I had been my whole life? Would she disappear forever, dissolved into this new identity? Or would she live on, like a ghost of the past I was trying to forget? Decide what to do next, Grandpa wrote. And I knew I had to decide. But not right now. Right now, I just needed to catch my breath and process everything that had happened over the past 2 days. I needed time. And luckily, now I had a place to take that time. A place Grandpa had created just for me. I opened the fridge and, just like Grandpa promised, it was stocked with food. Fresh groceries, as if someone had gone shopping yesterday or even earlier that morning. In the freezer were neatly packed containers of homemade meals. Chili, meatloaf, green beans stewed with bacon. My favorite dishes, the ones Mom used to make, and after she passed away, I made them myself. I heated up some chili, took out the bottle of wine Grandpa had mentioned. An expensive Californian wine I could never have afforded on my librarian's salary. Sitting at the table in this strange yet somehow comforting apartment, I felt like Alice falling down the rabbit hole. Everything was familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. Real and unreal. Mine and not mine. After lunch, I decided to explore the apartment more thoroughly. Maybe Grandpa had left more clues, instructions, explanations. In the office, a small room lined with bookshelves, I found a safe. It was cleverly hidden behind one of the shelves, which slid aside when I pressed a certain book. The Master and Margarita by Bulgakov, my favorite novel, one I'd read dozens of times. The safe was locked, but I immediately realized that the code must be in the sealed envelope I found in the car's box. I opened it and saw 6 numbers. 071554, Grandpa's birthday. Day, month, year. I entered the code, and the safe opened silently. Inside were folders of documents, another large stack of money much bigger than the one in the car, and a gun. Small, sleek, with a silencer. Next to it was a box of bullets. I recoiled, shocked. A gun? Why would Grandpa leave me a weapon? Who was I supposed to protect myself from? Or was it to protect myself from him? Carefully, I picked up one of the folders and opened it. Inside were photos. Lots of photos. And in most of them was Richard, my husband. But in situations I knew nothing about. With people I had never seen. In places he told me he had never been. There was Richard on a yacht, with half-naked model-looking women hanging off him. Richard at a table in an expensive restaurant with men in suits who clearly weren't his bank colleagues. Richard walking out of a luxurious mansion, gripping a briefcase. And then I froze, staring at the next photo. Richard, sitting in a cafe. Across from Julia, my sister. They were holding hands, looking at each other with an expression you couldn't possibly misread. The date on the photo: 3 years ago. 3 years ago, Richard and Julia were seeing each other behind my back. I flipped through the photos, feeling a wave of anger, pain, and betrayal build inside me. Richard and Julia at a restaurant. In a park. Leaving a hotel. Kissing in a car. And then, a photo of them with Grandpa. Grandpa sitting across from them, his face serious, focused. They were talking about something. What? What connected my husband, my sister, and my grandfather? In another folder were documents. Bank statements showing huge sums of money moving through Richard's accounts. Much more than a normal bank employee could earn. Contracts with foreign companies that looked like fronts for other operations. Property ownership papers from Spain, Italy, France, Thailand, and documents showing Richard regularly transferring large sums to a Swiss bank account. An account belonging to Julia. I leaned back in the chair, trying to process everything I had just discovered. My husband and my sister. Lovers. Partners in some shady financial dealings. And Grandpa knew. He had been watching them. Gathering evidence. But why? Why didn't he tell me? Why let me live in ignorance with a man who was betraying me in the worst possible way? And then I remembered another line from his letter. This is not just a gift. It's a responsibility. What you find will change not only your life, but the lives of many others. Use it wisely. What I had found really could change many lives. If these documents showed what I thought they did, Richard and Julia were involved in illegal financial operations. Maybe money laundering, tax evasion, maybe something even worse. And Grandpa had gathered the evidence. Evidence that was now in my hands. Evidence I could use. But how? Go to the police? The IRS? The FBI? What would happen then to Richard and Julia? Prison? Ruined careers? Public shame? Part of me, the part still bleeding from their betrayal, wanted exactly that. Wanted them to pay for their lies, for their cheating, for all the years I lived thinking I was happily married, thinking my sister, despite our differences, still wished me well. But another part, the rational part, knew this wasn't simple. That these documents, these photos, hinted at something much bigger than just a cheating husband and sister. That Grandpa, with his experience and intelligence, his connections and resources, hadn't gathered this information just to show me the true nature of my marriage. He wanted me to do something with it. Something that would change not only your life but the lives of many others. But what exactly? And why entrust it to me? Me, a woman who had spent her whole life avoiding conflict, always choosing the path of least resistance, never standing up for herself? Maybe that was exactly why. Maybe this was his way of finally forcing me to take control of my life. To make a choice not based on fear or habit, but on conscious decision. I closed the folder, put everything back in the safe, and locked it. I needed time to think. Time to figure out what I wanted to do with this information. With this life Grandpa had handed me. With this responsibility he had placed on my shoulders. I went back to the living room and sat in the chair by the window, looking out at evening New York. The city was lighting up, turning into a giant constellation spread out across the ground. And suddenly, I felt an unexpected calm. As if all the pieces of the puzzle had finally fallen into place. As if the path that had always been hidden in fog was now clear. I knew what I had to do. I knew the choice ahead of me. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to make it. "Thank you, Grandpa," I whispered, looking at his photo on the table. "I won't let you down." I woke up the next morning feeling like I was starting a new life. Sunlight filled the bedroom, birds were singing outside, and for a moment, I forgot everything. Richard and Julia's betrayal, Grandpa's secret legacy, the choice I had to make. But then reality came back, and I remembered it all. And strangely enough, instead of the heaviness I expected to feel, I felt filled with determination. I knew what I had to do. I knew how to use what Grandpa had left me. I got up, took a shower, and dressed in one of the elegant suits I found in the wardrobe. Dark blue, fine wool, perfectly tailored. It fit me like it had been made just for me. Which, honestly, it probably was. After breakfast, I gathered the necessary documents and keys and left the apartment. The concierge nodded to me with a friendly smile, and I smiled back, feeling less out of place than I had the day before. "Have a good day, Victoria," he said. "You too," I replied, surprised at how natural it sounded. As if I had always been Victoria Williams and wasn't just playing a role Grandpa had written for me. I got a cab and gave the driver the address of the bank where Grandpa said the safety deposit box was. As we drove through the morning streets of New York, I thought about what I was about to do. About the consequences it could have. At the bank, they treated me with the kind of respect reserved for important clients. I showed my passport, signed a few papers, and they escorted me to the vault. "Box number 237, the clerk repeated, checking my documents. "All set, Victoria. Please follow me." We passed through several layers of security. Cameras, scanners, armed guards. Finally, we entered a large room lined with rows of metal boxes. The clerk led me to one of them, inserted his key, then asked me to insert mine. "When you're finished, just press this button," he said, pointing to a red button on the wall. "An associate will come for you." I nodded, and he left me alone. I opened the box and found a small metal case inside. I pulled it out, set it on the table, and unlocked it with the code the same as the apartment safe. Grandpa's birth date. Inside were folders of documents that looked similar to the ones I had seen in the apartment safe. But as I opened the first folder, I realized this was something entirely different. These were records of secret bank accounts. Not Richard's or Julia's, but accounts belonging to high-ranking officials. Politicians, business leaders, government people. Names I saw on the news all the time. People seen as pillars of society, models of integrity and patriotism. But these documents told a different story. A story of billions moved out of the country. Of luxury villas, yachts, private jets, all paid for with money of questionable origin. A network of offshore companies, fake contracts, and frontmen designed to hide the real owners of these assets. And in every part of these schemes, Richard and Julia's names showed up. They weren't just lovers or petty criminals. They were key players in a massive financial system stretching across the country and beyond. My husband, who I thought was just a regular bank employee, was a financial genius who designed most of these schemes. And my sister, with her connections in international companies, made sure they ran smoothly overseas. I flipped through the documents, photos, and bank records, feeling a strange mix of shock, anger, and awe. As immoral as their actions were, I couldn't deny the scale and sophistication of what they had built. But how did Grandpa get this information? And why leave it to me? What did he expect me to do with it? The answer came in the last folder. There was a letter, in Grandpa's firm, familiar handwriting. "My dear Victoria," it began. "If you're reading this, then you already know about Richard and Julia's betrayal. You know they didn't just deceive you personally, but were involved in activities that harm our country, our people. I could have stopped them myself. I had the resources and the connections. But I didn't, for one reason. Because I knew it had to be you. Not for revenge, Victoria. Not because you want to hurt them the way they hurt you. But because you are the only person in this story who has always acted out of simple human decency, not personal gain. You've always been like that, Victoria. Kind, honest, willing to see the good in people. Even when they didn't deserve it. Even when they used your kindness against you. Now you have a choice. You can use this information to stop them, end what they're doing, maybe even bring them to justice. Or you can walk away. Start a new life as Victoria Williams, using the resources I've left you, living peacefully and freely. I won't tell you which choice is right. That's for you alone to decide. But know this: whatever you choose, I am proud of you. Proud of the woman you've become, despite all the pain and betrayal. And remember, Victoria, you are stronger than you think. Wiser than you believe. And you deserve so much more than the life you've been living. With love, your grandpa, Peter Michael. I closed the letter, tears streaming down my cheeks. Grandpa believed in me. He believed I would make the right choice. That I could stand up against the system Richard and Julia had helped build with their powerful partners. And I couldn't let him down. I couldn't just walk away, start a new life, leaving that corrupt structure untouched, still stealing from my country and my people. I put all the documents back into the case, locked it, returned it to the box, and pressed the button for the clerk. By the time I left the bank, it was already dark. I got in a cab and gave the driver an address. Not my new apartment on Park Avenue, but a different address entirely. The office of one of the country's biggest newspapers. The one where a journalist worked, famous for exposing corruption at the highest levels. I didn't know if he would see me without an appointment. I didn't know if he would even believe my story. I didn't know if I'd have the courage to go through with it. But I did know one thing. I wasn't the same Victoria who always chose the path of least resistance. I was becoming who I was always meant to be. Strong, decisive, ready to fight for what I believed was right. And whatever happened next, I wouldn't regret my choice. Because it was mine. Not forced by circumstances, not dictated by fear or habit. But made consciously, fully aware of the consequences. Thank you, Grandpa, I whispered, looking out at the New York night sky. For believing in me. for giving me the chance to become who I was always meant to be. The driver probably thought I was talking on the phone because he nodded without turning around. "We're here," he said, stopping in front of a modern glass and concrete building, the newspaper headquarters. I paid, got out, and walked toward the entrance, feeling my heart pound with nervousness and resolve. From this moment on, my new life was beginning. A life where I was no longer a victim of circumstance, but in control of my own fate. The journalist, Stephen Mitchell, turned out to be younger than I expected. No more than 35, with smart eyes behind stylish glasses and a permanent 2-day stubble that seemed part of his professional image. "Victoria Williams?" he said, offering his hand as his assistant led me into his office. "How can I help you?" I didn't beat around the bush. I told him everything I had learned from the documents in the safety deposit box. About the financial schemes, the powerful people involved, Richard and Julia's role. I didn't mention my real name, or that Richard was my husband and Julia my sister. That wasn't important for the story, and I didn't want to turn a serious investigation into a soap opera. Mitchell listened intently, taking notes in his pad. His face showed neither surprise nor doubt. Just the focused expression of a professional used to shocking revelations. "Do you have evidence?" he asked when I finished. "I do," I nodded. "But not with me. It's in a safe place. I can give you access if you agree to investigate." He tapped his pen on the desk, thinking. "This is dangerous, Victoria," he said finally. "The people you're talking about don't like having their secrets exposed. They will fight back. And trust me, they have the resources to do it. I understand the risks," I met his gaze calmly and confidently. "And I'm willing to take them." "Why?" He tilted his head, studying me. "Why do this? What's in it for you?" I paused for a moment. What was in it for me? Revenge on Richard and Julia? The satisfaction of seeing justice done? The knowledge that I did something important, something right? "I'm not doing this for gain, if that's what you're asking," I said finally. "I just believe people deserve to know the truth. About those who lead them. About those who manage their money. About those who talk about patriotism from podiums while funneling billions out of the country." Mitchell looked at me closely, as if trying to solve a puzzle. "You're an unusual woman, Victoria," he said at last. "Most people in your place would sell this information or use it for blackmail. But you came to a journalist. Someone who can make it public, but won't give you any personal reward." "Maybe I just believe in the power of truth," I said with a faint smile. "That it can make the world a better place. Even if the path to that change is long and hard." "All right," he nodded firmly. "I'll take on this investigation. But I need the documents." "Everything you have. You'll get them," I said, pulling a flash drive from my purse. "These are copies of some materials. Not everything, but enough for you to start and understand the scale of what you're dealing with." He took the flash drive, turning it over in his hands. "You understand that once we start publishing, you'll become a target? They'll look for the leak, and sooner or later, they may trace it back to you." "I understand," I nodded. "And I'm ready for that. I have certain precautions in place." "I hope they're effective," Mitchell said, slipping the flash drive into his pocket. "Because what you're doing isn't just leaking dirt. This is declaring war on some of the most powerful people in the country." "I know," I stood up, ready to leave. "And I'm ready for that war." We agreed on how to stay in contact, how I would pass him additional materials, and the security measures we both needed to follow. Mitchell was a professional. He didn't ask unnecessary questions or dig into my personal motives or history. He cared only about the facts, the documents, the proof. I left the newsroom feeling like I had just crossed an invisible line. Like I had made a decision that would change not only my life but the lives of many others. Just as Grandpa had warned. But I didn't feel fear or doubt. Only determination to see it through. And a strange relief that I no longer had to pretend everything was fine. That I was happy in my marriage, that my husband and sister wished me well, that my life was what I wanted it to be. I hailed a cab and gave the driver the address of my new apartment. The apartment that now truly felt like home. A place where I could be myself, without fear of judgment or ridicule. A place where I could plan my next moves without worrying that someone would discover my secrets. "I won't let you down, Grandpa," I whispered, staring out at the nighttime New York skyline. "I will finish this." And I knew I would keep that promise, no matter the cost. The following weeks were filled with secret meetings with Mitchell, passing documents, discussing publication strategies. I threw myself into the work completely, as if I had spent my entire life exposing corruption rather than checking out books in a small-town library. Mitchell was impressed by my understanding of the financial mechanisms Richard and his partners used. I didn't explain that most of what I knew came from Grandpa's documents and the intense self-study I had done over the past few weeks living in the Park Avenue apartment. "You have a talent for this, Victoria," he told me one day as we dissected a particularly complex offshore laundering scheme. "You should have worked in financial intelligence, not. What did you do before this?" I smiled but didn't answer. We had agreed from the start, no personal details, no backstories. Only facts relevant to the investigation. The first article was published a month after our first meeting. Mitchell didn't mention Richard or Julia by name or reveal the key players behind the schemes. He just explained how it worked, showed its scale, hinted at the possible involvement of high-level officials. But that was enough to ignite public debate. Social media, TV, and political circles exploded. Some called it a masterpiece of investigative journalism. Others claimed it was a paid hit piece aimed at discrediting the government. I watched the reactions from my apartment, reading news articles, comments, and analyses. And I waited. Waited for Richard and Julia to realize their carefully built system was starting to crumble. It didn't take long. 3 days after the article came out, Mitchell called. "They're mobilizing," he said bluntly. "Trying to find out where we got the information. No luck so far, but they won't stop." "How do you know?" I asked. "I have my sources," he paused. "Be careful, Victoria. These people aren't used to losing. They'll do whatever it takes to protect themselves." "I understand." I closed my eyes, picturing Richard's face when he read the article. His anger, his fear, his determination to find and silence whoever knew his secrets. "I'll be careful." That same day, I got another call. From an unknown number. I didn't answer, but a minute later a text came through. "Victoria, we need to talk. Urgently. Julia, my sister." How did she find this number? I was using a new SIM card under the name Victoria Williams. No one from my old life should have known it. But I had forgotten that Julia, with her connections and resources, could access databases unavailable to ordinary people. She could have traced the activation of the new SIM with a name too close to my real one to be coincidence. I didn't respond. I didn't want to talk to her. I wasn't ready for that confrontation, not now when the investigation was just starting and Mitchell and I had only scratched the surface. But Julia was relentless. The calls kept coming. Text after text. "Victoria, I know it's you. You don't understand what you're getting into. This is dangerous, not just for us, but for you too." I turned off the phone, deciding to change numbers. But before I could, there was a knock at my door. I approached quietly and looked through the peephole. Julia. My sister, whom I hadn't seen since Grandpa's funeral. Who, I now knew, had been seeing my husband behind my back for years, partnering with him in financial scams, lying to me on every level. She looked worried, nervous, nothing like the confident woman I knew. Her hair was messy, makeup smudged, eyes darting around anxiously. "Victoria, I know you're in there," she said, pressing the doorbell again before starting to knock. "Open up. We need to talk. It's important." I stood still, not even breathing, as if she could hear me through the door. I didn't want to open it. Didn't want to see her. Didn't want to hear her excuses or threats. "Victoria, please," her voice cracked. "I know you're angry. You have every right. But you don't understand what you're involved in. These people. They don't mess around. They'll kill you if they find out you're the leak. I stayed silent, but something inside me shifted. Not fear of her warning, but a strange realization. Julia was worried about me. Despite everything she had done, part of her still cared about her little sister. Or was it just another trick? Another manipulation, counting on my naivety and tendency to see the good in people? Victoria, I get that you don't want to see me, Julia continued when I didn't answer. But at least listen. What you're doing, it's not just exposing corruption. You're interfering with people who control billions. People who have all the resources to protect themselves. They will stop at nothing. I moved closer to the door, resting my forehead against it, but still couldn't bring myself to open. What do you want, Julia? I finally asked. Why are you here? To threaten me? To scare me into stopping? To protect you, you idiot. Her voice broke. Because, despite everything, you're my sister. And I don't want you to get hurt. I let out a bitter laugh. You don't want me to get hurt? Did you think about that when you were sleeping with my husband? When you and he were scheming to launder billions, did my feelings ever cross your mind? It's more complicated than you think. Julia's voice grew quiet. I'm not proud of what I did. Or how I treated you. But I had my reasons. And now isn't the time to talk about the past. This is about your safety. Your life. I stayed silent, unsure what to say. Part of me wanted to open the door and talk to her face to face. Another part feared it was a trap. That Richard or someone else could be with her, sent to stop me. Leave the country, Victoria, Julia's voice pleaded. Leave now, before they figure out it's you. Start a new life somewhere in Europe or Canada. You have the money, the passport, everything you need. I froze. How did she know about my new identity? About the money Grandpa left me? About the passport and the name Victoria Williams? How do you know? I asked, unable to hide my shock. Grandpa, she said simply. He told me. Before he died. Said he left you a way out. In case things went wrong. I stayed quiet, trying to process this new piece of information. Grandpa told Julia what he had planned for me. But why? Didn't he worry she'd use it against me? Or was it his way of giving her a chance to redeem herself? A chance to protect her sister when it mattered most? Listen, Victoria, Julia's voice grew more insistent. I know you don't trust me. And you have every reason not to. But believe me in this. You're in danger. And the longer you stay, the greater the risk. I closed my eyes, trying to collect my thoughts. What should I do? Trust the sister who had betrayed me for years? Or listen to my gut telling me she might actually be right? That I really was in danger, and maybe leaving at least for a while was the smartest thing to do? I'm not leaving, I finally said. Not now, when we've just started the investigation. Not now, when so much is at stake. Damn it, Victoria. Julia slammed her fist against the door. You've always been stubborn, but this could get you killed. These people don't mess around. They've killed for less. Then why are you working with them? I asked. Why help them steal money from their own country, from their own people? Julia was silent for so long I thought she had left. But then I heard her quiet, almost whispering voice. Because I didn't have a choice. I made a mistake once, and I've been paying for it ever since. But you still have a choice, Victoria. And I'm begging you, choose life. I opened the door. I couldn't keep having this conversation through a barrier. Julia stood there with tears staining her face, her eyes tired and full of genuine worry. Come in, I stepped aside to let her in. Tell me everything. From the beginning. We sat in the kitchen, drinking tea as Julia talked. She told me how she started working for an international company, how her career took off, how she caught the attention of people who offered her a special job. A job she couldn't refuse if she wanted to keep not just her career, but her life. She told me how she met Richard. It wasn't by accident, but an assignment. He was already working for them, creating financial schemes, and they needed someone with international connections to help execute their plans abroad. I didn't know he was married to you when we first met, Julia admitted, looking away. All I knew was his name and his job. And by the time I realized he was your husband, it was too late to back out. Too late to back out? I shook my head in disbelief. You saw me all the time for 3 years while you were sleeping with my husband, Julia. 3 years. You looked me in the eyes, came over for holidays, accepted birthday gifts. How could you? Julia gripped her cup so hard her knuckles turned white. I'm not proud of what I did, Victoria, her voice trembled. But you don't understand how it works. Once you agree to the first deal, they own you. They gather leverage evidence they can use against you anytime. And each time, the stakes get higher. And Richard? Was he forced to? Or was he doing all this willingly? Julia let out a bitter laugh. Richard? He was one of the architects behind it all. A financial genius, they called him. A man who could launder money so well that even the best auditors couldn't trace it. I felt a deep pain tighten in my chest. 15 years of marriage to a man I clearly never really knew. And our marriage? Was that part of the plan too? Julia looked away, and her silence told me everything before she even spoke. At first. Yes, she finally said. He needed a cover. The image of a respectable family man, a loving husband. You were perfect for that role. Quiet, modest, never asking too many questions. And after that? I don't know, Victoria, Julia shrugged. I think he did care for you. In his own way. As much as someone like Richard is capable of caring about anyone. I sat there, trying to process it all. My marriage, which I thought was imperfect but real, had just been part of a cover. And my sister, the person I grew up with, the one I loved despite our differences, had been part of this lie too. Why are you here, Julia? I finally asked. Is it really to warn me? Or to confirm that I'm the one leaking the information? I'm here because I care about you, her eyes filled with tears. Because despite everything I've done, you are my sister. And I don't want anything bad to happen to you. How did you know it was me? That I'm behind Mitchell's articles? There was no doubt, Julia shrugged. After you disappeared, after Richard kicked you out. And then suddenly these articles come out, with information only a very small circle of people would know. Richard still doesn't suspect you, by the way. He thinks the leak is one of his partners or a competitor. Not someone close. And you didn't tell him? No, Julia shook her head. And I won't. But Victoria, there are others. People much smarter and more dangerous than Richard. Sooner or later, they'll figure it out. Or find a way to track you down. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the darkening New York skyline. The city lights twinkled, creating an illusion of peace and stability. An illusion I had mistaken for reality for so long. I won't stop, Julia, I finally said without turning around. Not now, when we've just begun. Not now, when there's a chance for justice. Justice? Julia let out a humorless laugh. You really think a few articles in a newspaper can take down a system that's been built over decades? A system backed by the full power of the state? I don't know, I turned to face her. But I have to try. For Grandpa, who believed in me. For myself, after spending so long letting others make my decisions. Julia looked at me with a mix of surprise, admiration, and fear. You've changed, Victoria, she finally said. You were never this determined. I never knew what I was capable of, I smiled, surprised at how calm I felt. I always felt like a shadow. Yours, Richard's, even Grandpa's. But now I've finally found my own path. Julia stood, walked over to me, and took my hands. I'm scared for you, Victoria, her voice trembled with genuine worry. These people, they won't stop at anything. I know, I squeezed her hands back. And I'm ready. I have protection. Grandpa's inheritance? She gave a sad little smile. He always believed in you more than me. He always saw something in you that others didn't. He believed in both of us. I shook my head. Just in different ways. He saw your strength, your ambition, and my ability to stand up to a system everyone else thought was invincible. So what now? Julia asked. What are you going to do? Keep going with what I started. I let go of her hands and walked over to the table where documents for my next meeting with Mitchell lay. Publish the information. Make it public. Let people know who really controls their country, their economy, their lives. It's dangerous, Victoria. Julia shook her head. They'll find you. Then let them try, I shrugged. I'm no longer that naive librarian they can intimidate. I have resources, knowledge, support. And I'm not afraid. Julia looked at me for a long time, as if seeing me for the first time. Then she nodded, like she was accepting my choice. Then let me help, she said unexpectedly. I have access to information you don't. Names, dates, amounts, accounts. Everything that can make your articles even stronger. I froze, stunned. Julia, who had been part of this system for years, was offering to be an informant. To risk her career, her safety, possibly her life? Why? I asked, unable to hide my skepticism. Why do you want to help? Why now? Because you're my sister, she said simply. And because maybe this is my only chance to do something right. After all these years of doing what I had to instead of what I believed was right. I looked at her, searching for hidden motives, traps, another betrayal. But all I saw was a tired woman who, maybe for the first time in a long while, was being honest. I'll think about it, I finally said. But not now. I need time to process all this. Of course, Julia nodded. I understand. Just know the offer stands. Whenever you're ready. If you're ready. Just let me know. She pulled a card out of her purse and set it on the table. This is my new number. A secure line. You can call anytime. I picked up the card, turning it over in my hands, not knowing what to say. Part of me wanted to believe her to believe that despite all the lies and betrayals, some piece of her still cared about me as a sister. Another part feared it was just another trap, another manipulation. Thank you, I finally said, slipping the card into my pocket. I'll contact you when I'm ready. Julia nodded, understanding that was all she could hope for right now. She stood up, ready to leave. Be careful, Victoria, she said, standing in the doorway. They won't stop at anything. I know, I smiled with a confidence I hadn't felt before. And I'm ready. After Julia left, I sat in silence for a long time, thinking about our conversation. Could I trust her? After everything she'd done? After all the years of lies and betrayal? But there was another question that bothered me even more. Could I afford to refuse her help? The information she offered could make our investigation even stronger, even more damaging to the system we were trying to expose. I didn't have the answers. Not yet. But I knew one thing, I had to keep going. Keep revealing the truth, no matter how bitter it was. With that thought, I started preparing for my next meeting with Mitchell. We still had a lot of work ahead. The following weeks were intense. Mitchell's new publication sparked growing waves of reaction. Social media exploded with debates, political analysts weighed in, and even state-run TV channels usually ignoring such topics were forced to respond. Of course, in their usual way, dismissing the investigation as foreign propaganda. I watched it all unfold from my Park Avenue apartment, continuing to analyze documents, prepare materials for future releases, and coordinate with Mitchell. All the while, Julia's offer hovered in my mind. The thought of the information she could provide, the evidence that could make our case undeniable. But I didn't call her. I wasn't ready. I wasn't sure I could trust her. Yet I knew I would have to make that decision soon, and it could determine not only the success of our investigation but my own safety. I had just finished working on new documents for Mitchell when my phone rang. An unknown number. I didn't answer, but a minute later, a text arrived. Turn on the TV. Any news channel. Urgent. J. My heart sped up. I turned on the TV and flipped to a news channel. And froze. On the screen was Richard. My husband. Ex-husband. He stood before reporters, surrounded by police officers. Cameras flashed as journalists shouted questions. A banner ran along the bottom of the screen, head of financial department of major energy corporation arrested. Suspected of embezzling funds from the U.S. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Richard, arrested? But how? Why? Our investigation wasn't even at the stage of naming names yet. We hadn't released direct evidence against him. The phone rang again. Same number. This time I answered. Julia? I asked, eyes still locked on the screen as Richard was led into a police car. You see it? Julia's voice was tight. They arrested him. And a few others from our team. How did this happen? I still can't believe it. This isn't because of our publications. We haven't even named names yet. Of course it's not, Julia said bitterly. This is internal politics. Someone at the top decided Richard and his people were getting too greedy. They needed to be put in their place. But that's good, isn't it? I struggled to process what was happening. They're arrested, they'll be charged, there will be a trial. You don't understand how it works, Victoria, Julia cut me off. This isn't justice. It's just a show. They'll spend some time under house arrest, pay some fines, maybe return part of the money. Then it will all start again, just with different people filling the same roles. Then why are you calling me? Why is this so important? Because, Julia paused, as if gathering strength. Because now it's your turn, Victoria. Now they'll start looking for the source of the leaks. And when they find you, and they will, believe me, your fate will be far worse than Richard's. A chill ran down my spine. Not from fear, but from realizing the game had just entered a new level. The stakes were higher now, and I had to be ready for the consequences. What do you suggest? I asked, already knowing her answer. The same thing I said before. Leave. Now, while you still can. Start a new life somewhere they can't find you. I stayed silent, thinking about her words. Leave. Abandon everything I'd started. Walk away from the mission that had become so much more than just an investigation. It was my purpose. My way to restore justice, to stand up against betrayal, to prove I was not the weak, dependent woman everyone thought I was. I can't, Julia, I finally said. Not now, when we're so close. Not now, when there's a chance the truth will finally come out. God, Victoria, you've always been stubborn, but this time it could cost you your life. Julia's voice broke. These people don't joke around. They've killed for less. I know the risks, I said calmly, surprised by my own steadiness. And I'm ready to take them. For Grandpa, who believed in me. For myself, after spending so long letting others decide my life. Julia was silent for so long I thought the call had dropped. But then I heard her quiet sigh. Then I need to see you, she finally said. Immediately. I have information that can help you. Information that can make your investigation undeniable. I hesitated. Could I trust Julia? After everything that had happened? What if it was a trap? What if she was working for the very people she warned me about? But what if she was truly trying to help? What if this was my only chance to finish what I had started before they found me? Okay, I finally said. Where and when? Central Park. By the pond near your apartment. In an hour. Come alone. Okay, I nodded, though she couldn't see it. I'll be there. I hung up, feeling a strange mix of fear and determination rise inside me. I didn't know what would happen in the park. Whether I would find help from my sister or walk straight into a trap set by those who wanted to silence me. But I knew I had to go. I had to find out what Julia wanted to tell me. I had to use every chance to finish what I started. I opened the safe and took out the gun Grandpa had left me. Checked it was loaded, then tucked it into my coat pocket. I gathered the most important documents, the ones I hadn't yet given to Mitchell, and put them in my bag. After thinking for a moment, I wrote a short note and sealed it in an envelope. Just in case something happened to me. Just in case the meeting with Julia was a trap. I left my apartment, nodding to the concierge who smiled politely at me, and walked toward the park. It was a cold autumn evening, a light drizzle falling from the dark sky. I pulled up my coat collar against the wind and quickened my pace. The park was nearly empty. A few passers-by hurried along, not paying attention to the lone woman walking with purpose. I reached the meeting spot, a bench by the small pond where we'd agreed to meet. Julia wasn't there yet. I sat down, trying to look calm, though my senses were on high alert. I noticed every movement, every sound, every shadow. 10 minutes passed. 15. Still no Julia. I started to get nervous. What if she wasn't coming? What if this was just a trick to lure me out of my safe apartment? What if someone was watching me right now, waiting to make their move? I was about to leave when I saw a familiar figure walking quickly down the path. Julia. She looked tense, constantly glancing over her shoulder as if afraid of being followed. "Sorry I'm late," she said as she approached. I had to make sure no one was trailing me. "And? Were you sure?" I couldn't hide the sarcasm in my voice. "As sure as I can be," she said, sitting down beside me and placing a small folder between us. "This has everything you need. Names, dates, amounts, bank accounts. Proof that this wasn't just about a few people getting rich, it was about funding. Other projects." "What kind of projects?" I took the folder but didn't open it. "Political ones," Julia spoke softly, almost a whisper. "Destabilizing neighboring countries, bribing officials, funding radical groups. All the things that are officially denied at the highest levels." My heart pounded faster. If what she said was true, this wasn't just corruption. These were crimes of international magnitude. "Where did you get this information?" I asked, still not opening the folder. "From the same place Grandpa did," Julia gave a faint smile. "I was his granddaughter too, remember? And he prepared me, in his own way." I stared at her, trying to understand what she meant. Grandpa prepared Julia too? Like he did me? But why? For what? You really don't get it, do you? Julia shook her head. Grandpa wasn't just some retired agent trying to right a few wrongs. He was part of the system. A system that's existed for decades, that survives changes in governments, regimes, ideologies. What are you talking about? I still didn't understand. I'm talking about Grandpa not just working for the country, Victoria. He worked for an organization that stands above countries, above governments. An organization that keeps the balance of power in check so that no one side becomes too strong, too influential. I sat silent, trying to process what I was hearing. It sounded like something out of a spy novel, some conspiracy theory. But if it was true, if Grandpa really was part of a secret organization, what did that mean for me? For my investigation? For my safety? And you, are you working for this organization too? I finally asked. Is that why you were planted in this scheme? Is that why you're helping me now? Not exactly, Julia shook her head. Yes, I was recruited. But not to expose the scheme. My job was to control it. To make sure the money went where it was supposed to, and in the right amounts. Where it was supposed to go. I felt anger rising inside me. You're talking about destabilizing countries, bribing officials, funding radicals. How is that where it's supposed to go? The world is more complicated than it seems, Victoria, Julia spoke calmly, but in her eyes I saw a strange mix of exhaustion and determination. Sometimes it's not about choosing between good and evil, but between lesser and greater evil. And sometimes you have to be part of the evil to control it, to keep it contained, to steer it. I looked at my sister and barely recognized her. This confident, cynical woman talking about controlling evil, about choosing between degrees of darkness. Was this the same Julia I grew up with? Or was she, too, just an illusion I had built in my mind, like my marriage to Richard? So what now? I asked, gripping the folder in my hands. What do you want me to do with this information? Use it, Julia said simply. Publish it. Make it public. Let people know what's really happening in their country, in the world. But won't that go against the interests of your organization? Don't they want to keep all this hidden? Julia gave a faint smile. Sometimes the only way to control a system is to expose it. To force it to adapt, to change, to become more accountable. I opened the folder and flipped through a few pages. Documents, photos, bank statements. Everything that could form the basis of the biggest investigative story in years. Everything that could change not just my life, but the lives of countless others. What about you? I asked, closing the folder. If I publish this, if the truth comes out, what happens to you? I don't know, Julia shrugged. Maybe they'll pull me out. Maybe they'll reassign me. Maybe. She fell silent, leaving the thought unfinished. Maybe they'll eliminate you as an unnecessary witness, I finished for her. That's possible, she nodded, with surprising calm. But I'm ready for that risk. Just like you are. We sat in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. I thought of Grandpa, of his secret life, of his legacy. Of the car in the garage, the apartment in New York, the documents he left for me. I thought of Richard, of our marriage, which turned out to be nothing but a cover for his secret life. I thought of Julia, her double or perhaps triple life, and her role in this tangled mess. And I thought of myself. The woman who always saw herself as weak, dependent, and capable of decisive action. The woman who, over these last few weeks, had changed beyond recognition. Who found the strength to stand up to a system that seemed unbeatable. Who found her path in a world that always felt too complex, too harsh for her. What are you going to do? Julia finally asked, breaking the silence. What I have to, I looked her straight in the eyes. What Grandpa left all this for. What he prepared me for, even if he didn't realize it. Julia nodded, as if she expected nothing less. Then you need to go, she stood up. And fast. There's not much time. Where? I stood up too, gripping the folder. To your journalist. Give him these documents. And then disappear. At least for a while, until things calm down. And you? What will you do? I have my own plans, she smiled mysteriously. Don't worry about me, Victoria. I've always known how to take care of myself. She held out her hand, and after a moment's hesitation, I took it. Despite everything, despite all the betrayal and lies, she was still my sister. The woman I grew up with, shared childhood secrets with, teenage dreams, family holidays. Good luck, Victoria, she said, releasing my hand. I hope we meet again. In better times. Good luck, Julia, I replied. And thank you. For the help. For the truth. For everything. She nodded, turned, and walked quickly down the path, soon disappearing from sight. I stood there, clutching the folder that could change not just my life, but the lives of so many others. I knew I had to move fast. I knew time was running out, that danger was growing by the minute. I knew I needed to get to Mitchell, hand him the documents, and then disappear. At least for a while, until the dust settled. But before I left, I looked one more time at the spot where my sister had just been sitting. And I felt a strange calm. As if a chapter of my life had just closed, and now I was ready for the next one. No matter how hard or dangerous it would be. "Thank you, Grandpa," I whispered, lifting my eyes to the evening sky. "For believing in me. For preparing me for this moment. For giving me the chance to become who I was always meant to be." And with those words, I turned and walked quickly down the path towards my new life. I didn't go straight to Mitchell. First, I returned to the apartment, packed the essentials, documents, money, everything I might need in the coming days or weeks. Everything I could carry without attracting attention. Then I called Mitchell and arranged a meeting. Not at the newsroom where we might be seen, but at a small cafe on the edge of the city. A place where we could talk quietly, without fear of being overheard or watched. Mitchell was already there, sitting at a table by the window, his notebook and pen ready as always. He nodded when he saw me, and in his eyes I saw something new. Not just professional curiosity, but genuine concern. "Have you seen the news?" he asked as I sat down across from him. "Richard's arrest, and his colleagues?" I nodded. "I've seen it. That's part of why I wanted to meet." I placed Julia's folder on the table. "This has everything you need to finish the investigation. Names, dates, amounts, evidence. It proves that Richard's arrest and his colleagues is just the tip of the iceberg." Mitchell opened the folder and flipped through a few pages. His eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed with professional focus. "This is impressive," he finally said. "But also extremely dangerous. If what's in here is true. If this really proves state involvement in international financial schemes. In destabilizing neighboring countries. And bribing foreign officials." "It's true," I interrupted him. "Every word, every number. And it needs to become public knowledge." Mitchell looked at me carefully. "You understand publishing this isn't just an investigation. This is a political bomb. One that could blow up not just a few careers, but international relations, economic ties, political alliances." "I understand," I nodded. "And I'm ready for the consequences." "Are you sure you're ready?" Mitchell leaned in over the table. "Because the consequences could be serious. Not just for those mentioned here, but for you. For me. For everyone involved in this publication." I paused. Was I ready? Ready for my life to change forever? Ready to become a target for people who would stop at nothing to keep their secrets? Ready to lose everything, my freedom, my safety, maybe even my life? But then I remembered Grandpa, his faith in me, his letter. "You're stronger than you think. Wiser than you believe. And you deserve so much more than your old life ever gave you." "I'm ready," I said firmly. Because truth matters more than fear. Because silence makes us complicit. Because sometimes you have to risk everything to change something for the better. Mitchell looked at me for a long moment, as if trying to see past my words, to weigh my resolve. Then he nodded, as if coming to a decision. "All right," he closed the folder and tucked it into his jacket. "I'll publish it. But not all at once. Gradually, to maximize the impact. To give people time to process each piece before we move to the next." "As you say," I nodded. "You're the professional. You know best how to release this." "And what about you?" he asked, studying me carefully. "What will you do once we start publishing? Once they start hunting for the source?" "I'll disappear," I smiled. "For a while. Until it all settles down." "Disappear?" He raised an eyebrow. "That's not as easy as it sounds. Especially when the people looking for you have unlimited resources." "I have my own resources." I thought of the Park Avenue apartment, the money Grandpa left me, the passport in the name of Victoria Williams. And my own methods. "I hope they're good enough." Mitchell stood up, ready to leave. "Because what we're about to do is declaring war on some of the most powerful people in this country." "I know," I stood too. "And I'm ready for that war." We shook hands, set up secure ways to communicate, and reviewed safety protocols. Mitchell was a professional. He knew how to protect his sources, how to minimize risks for everyone involved. I left the cafe feeling like I had done what I needed to do. Fulfilled my duty to Grandpa, to myself, to the truth. Whatever happened next, I knew I wouldn't regret my choice. There was only one thing left to do. Disappear. Become Victoria Williams, a woman with no past, no ties, no weaknesses. A woman they couldn't find, couldn't stop, couldn't silence. I went back to the Park Avenue apartment, packed the last of my things, and closed the door behind me. I went down to the underground parking garage, found space 42 where Grandpa said another car was waiting for me. But it wasn't the old classic car like in the garage back home. It was new, modern. A black BMW with tinted windows and plates that I was sure were perfectly legal but couldn't be traced back to me. I got in, started the engine, and for the first time in a long while felt a strange sense of peace. Like all the pieces of the puzzle had finally come together. Like every road, every decision, every choice I'd made had led me to this exact moment. The moment I finally became who I was always meant to be. Strong, decisive, ready to fight for what I believed was right. I pulled out of the garage, merging into the flow of traffic, heading out of the city. I didn't know where I was going or what lay ahead. All I knew was that I would never again be the Victoria who always chose the path of least resistance. The woman who drifted through life, letting others decide her fate. I was the new Victoria. A woman who chose her own path. A woman unafraid of the consequences of her choices. A woman ready to fight for the truth, no matter how bitter it was. And with that thought, I drove on. Toward a new life, new challenges, new possibilities. Toward a future I could finally shape for myself. 5 years passed since that day I left New York behind my old life, my old name, my old self. 5 years that changed not just me but the country and the world we all live in. The publication of the documents I gave Mitchell really was a political bomb. Each new article, each new revelation sparked waves of discussion, protests, demands for investigations. At first, the government tried to dismiss the stories, calling them fake news, smear campaigns, attempts to undermine the country. But then, when the evidence became too overwhelming, when the international community started demanding answers, their strategy changed. Arrests began. First the small players, then people higher up. Richard, who was first arrested on minor charges, soon faced far more serious accusations. Treason, involvement in international crime networks, laundering billions of dollars. His trial was closed to the public, no details leaked to the press. But rumors spread that he'd cut a deal with prosecutors, naming names, dates, amounts. Thanks to his testimony, people once thought untouchable were arrested high-ranking officials, oligarchs, heads of state corporations. As for Julia, I hadn't heard anything about her in all these years. Sometimes I thought I saw her face in a crowd, in a shop window reflection, in a passing stranger. But it was always just my imagination playing tricks. My sister disappeared as effectively as I had. Maybe her organization pulled her out, like she said. Maybe she was hiding, fearing revenge from those she betrayed. Or maybe she was no longer alive. I tried not to dwell on that. Instead, I focused on my new life, on who I had become. After leaving New York, I spent some time traveling through Europe, never staying long in one place, always ready to move on if I felt danger closing in. Eventually, I settled in a small town in Portugal. A quiet, peaceful place where no one asked questions, where I could just be Victoria Williams, the American expat seeking solitude and calm. I bought a little house by the ocean and opened a bookstore. The librarian in me couldn't stay buried forever. Slowly, I adapted to the language, to the customs, to the gentle rhythm of life so different from the frantic pace I once knew. All that time, I kept up with the news from America. Followed how the investigation unfolded, how the country changed, how the world reacted to each new revelation. I watched through international news agencies, online reports, the occasional letter from Mitchell, who found ways to reach me without revealing my location. Sometimes I wondered if it was worth it. All the sacrifices, the risks, the pain. Did my decision to publish the documents really change anything? Was the world better, fairer, more honest? I don't know. Probably not. One investigation, one series of publications can't change a system built over decades. It can't eradicate corruption embedded in every level of society. It can't make people honest, fair, responsible, but maybe that was never the point. Maybe I didn't do it to change the world, but to change myself. To prove to myself that I could be strong, decisive, independent. That I could stand up to a system that seemed unbeatable. That I could make choices based not on fear or habit, but on my own values and beliefs. And in that sense, I succeeded. I became a different woman. No longer the quiet, invisible librarian who always chose the path of least resistance. But a strong, independent person unafraid to go against the current, to stand by her principles, no matter the cost. Sometimes, standing on the shore, watching the endless waves, I think about Grandpa. What would he say if he could see me now? Would he be proud? Would he approve of my choices? Would he think I used his legacy wisely? I don't know the answers to those questions. But I do know I regret nothing. Not the decision to publish, not leaving my old life behind, not even the 15 years of marriage to a man who, as it turned out, never truly loved me. Because all those events, all those choices, all those years made me who I am today. A woman unafraid of the future. A woman who knows her worth. A woman who finally found her own way. And maybe that was Grandpa's greatest legacy to me. Not the classic car, not the apartment in New York, not the money or the documents, but his faith in me. His belief that I was stronger than I thought, wiser than I believed, and deserved far more than my old life ever gave me. With that faith, I keep moving forward. Day by day, step by step, choice by choice. Building my life, my story, my future. Shaping them into what I want them to be. I sometimes think about that old garage on the outskirts of town, the place that changed my life forever. About the black Thunderbird still waiting under its cover, about the hidden documents, about Grandpa's letter and the moment I first realized my life could be different. That I could be different. Maybe one day I'll go back there. When things have settled down, when the past no longer haunts me, when it's safe to visit the country I still, despite everything, consider my home. Or maybe I never will. Maybe this life, here by the ocean, among books and quiet days, is exactly what I always wanted. What I was always searching for without even knowing it. Time will tell. For now, I just live. Day by day, enjoying each moment, every sunrise, every book I read, every smile I exchange with neighbors, customers, or strangers passing by. Living a full, real life. A life I chose for myself. And maybe that is the greatest treasure I've ever found. Far more valuable than any old garage Grandpa left me.